So on this part of my series on constructive measures, I'm going to be introducing one of the next steps or kind of building blocks for helping us develop and construct measurement tools. And so the idea is to work with something called a construct map. And a construct map is really a powerful way of defining, you probably can guess it, constructs. In all of measurement and especially psychological measurement, um, we deal with constructs that are sometimes really difficult to precisely define, such as suffering, flourishing, kind of social cohesion. A lot of these different types of constructs are difficult to put a specific definition on that is useful for measurement. Now we can go back and forth and develop really elaborate and sometimes very um, precise and amazing definitions for these constructs, but we also can move forward with these definitions in terms of how it relates to measurement. And so that's really the goal, is to develop a construct map that relates our construct definition to the items, people, and our scores. So this is kind of the general idea. We think of any construct has maybe a relatively simple structure where some people are really high on our construct X and some people are really low on our construct X. Now, a lot of our constructs are really complex and multidimensional and we can argue back and forth on whether this is appropriate. But the idea is, well, at the end of the day, we're going to create a score that orders people from low on X to high. So let's automatically reduce the complexity in our thinking to what we're going to use to make inferences and interpretations. And we can develop ways as we move forward of incorporating that complexity in really powerful ways. So the idea of the construct map is to think of, well, we got this ordering that we're going to create. We're going to have low scores and high scores. And, well, let's talk about people. So for people that are high on X, they exhibit A. We can describe individuals that are really high on X as A. However, we can characterize people that are really low on X as B. And so there might be some people in the middle over here that we might describe as C. And so we can think about what are the characteristics and what are the behaviors people exhibit on our construct that we can describe differently and describe qualitatively differently across our hypothetical unrealistic dimension, but the dimension we're going to use to create and order people. And so we can think about that. And so the construct map provides us a mechanism and a process for thinking about differences on our construct between different people. Now, the next major piece of it is thinking about items and item responses. And so, well, people that respond to item 1, meaning that they probably agree with the statement, well, they typically are, say for item 1, they typically align with people up in this higher region. We would describe people that respond to this item, and that responses to that item aligns with these types of behaviors and these types of people. However, maybe for item 2 on our assessment, if people agree with that statement, we would kind of describe them a little bit more in the middle. Whereas for item 3, we can kind of think that more aligns with those that are lower on the scale and lower on our trait. And that there's kind of a matching effect between items and the characteristics of people. So when we talk about construct maps more in the future, we'll talk about, well, what happens when these responses have more than 2 response categories? Well, what does it mean to respond to category 1 versus 2 versus 3 versus however many categories you have? do each of those categories align with our intended scale and our intended characteristics of people? And that's one of the things we're going to embark on, is like, how can we make that alignment in a way that's powerful? So to kind of sum it up, a construct map helps us align people, items, and item responses with scores. And scores, and it really helps us align all of these pieces with our definitions of a construct. So going through each of these pieces really allows us to bring together a more cohesive definition for what we're trying to measure. And we can really describe and align what our process is for these different pieces, which helps us give a really strong argument for what we're trying to measure and how our assessment will use and capture what we're trying to measure. And that's what we'll talk about more in the future, is, well, how can we incorporate the complexity of multiple dimensions? And how can we incorporate, well, maybe aligning people high to low isn't appropriate. We'll talk about in a future video of how can we incorporate some of these complexities.